people want to hear they want to hear the real stories. They don't always want to just hear from the brands. They want to hear from the people that they trust.
Hey, Dace, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you. How are you?
It's good. It's good. Apart from the weather, if anyone is watching, I know that a lot of people listen, but now this is, my background for the past 3-4 seasons. And you can see the weather of New York happening. And it's mostly like November weather, more than, summertime, unfortunately, but it's New York City. What can you do about it, right? So it is what it is. So Dace, why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself before we get started, with today's episode? And what we do, we use the map. Is this way where basically we understand a bit more about the guest, knowing about their mission. So basically, what do you aim to achieve with your work? Achievements, anything that you are very proud of, any notable milestone, either career-wise or in your life, or both, if you want, and the purpose. So why do you do what you do?
I've been at Nationwide for a little more than 13 years and on this social media team for a little more than 7 years. And our mission is actually quite simple. And that is to every day answer the question of why would someone want to follow or see any sort of social media content from their insurance company or from their financial services provider?
Yeah.
We are, we're competing with other brands and content creators that are doing some really, really cool things. And our content needs to stand up to that. And so we approach that by creating content that is not just engaging, but takes this incredibly complex industry, financial services, retirement, insurance, these really important, complex things that people need, and make it hopefully easier to understand, or at least approachable or relatable. And we do that in a way so people not just want to consume it, but that they can save it or share it with their friends or their networks. That's really our mission. And I think the achievements or the milestones, I think, is a great segue, because I mentioned I've been in this industry for a little more than a decade now. And I actually got my start in broadcast journalism back in the early 2000s. I was working in Washington, D.C., doing broadcast journalism. And, early 2000s, starting in my career, which I then transitioned into more about public relations and then eventually got into social media. But if you think about the achievements or the milestones around that time frame, early 2000s, we were still coming into kind of the peak of that 24-hour news cycle, which was really changing the way that at least information was consumed by people. And then soon to follow was the start of all of these social media platforms, like the very beginning of at least the ones that are still around today, the big major platforms. So I've been lucky enough to be a part of a lot of first-time companies joining these platforms and figuring out what it's like to be a brand on social media, or the first time they started an ad campaign, which was relatively new at the time. Then obviously that changed into more niche building of communities and groups, or even live streams on social was very new. And I feel like even the broadcast journalism background, public relations, which is very much, again, just about storytelling. It's about visual storytelling. It's about making these complex issues easier to understand. And so I kind of think that no matter what, all of the achievements that I've had, or at least big milestones in my career, kind of go back to that idea of trying to get information in a relatable way, not just kind of regardless of whatever medium is available. That's kind of been the foundation of my career, which I really, really appreciate. And I think that's also kind of the purpose too, right? I feel like I love being creative. I love being part of creative teams. I think the idea of taking something that starts as nothing, or just starts out as an idea, and then turns into something tangible. And then you put that out there in the world. And what I think is so cool about social media is that you can't hide from that. You get the real-time results, you get the real-time performance, and you know when something works and you know when something doesn't. And to be a part of that creative process, there's just something really inspiring in that for me.
Fantastic. And I want to hear more about later, about what happened in the last decade, right? You said 13 years with the company, 7 with the social media. We all know what I say all the time, that 1 minute in social media is 7 years in any other industry, right? That's what I say all the time. It's like Interstellar, basically, right? What happens here, it's crazy for everything else. And so I'm very curious to hear more about that. Before we go there, let's talk about something that is very intrinsic inside, like social media, and then something that became even more popular, especially thanks to TikTok, and then Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and that is music, right? So music-driven campaigns and branding, especially, right? Many brands out there have a specific jingle, right? Have some sort of music, something. And Nationwide, of course, we all know, right, that the jingle it's very important for you, right? There have been many iterations in different commercials. So tell me a bit more, like why it is important to find your music branding. How do you come out with that, and how do you keep it right during the years, especially when there are so new trends happening on social media? How do you keep it alive all the time?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's very funny. Anyone who at least works for Nationwide or is anywhere near the company, when you say you work for Nationwide, the immediate first reaction is you get that jingle sung or played back to you right away. So I'd say a couple things. I think the idea of that musical background, that audible connection to our brand, I know not every brand or every company has that, but it is a brand attribute. So whether it's music, a jingle, or if it's something else, whatever that natural tie to your brand is, or if you can create that natural tie to your brand, I think that's really the most important thing. I'm not telling everyone to go out there and write a jingle. Our jingle actually is decades old. It was started in the 60s when a lot of companies were creating jingles. But the fact that it's still around and still associated with our brand, that's kind of the focus that we take for our social media, at least a part of our strategy. Mm-hmm. And you look at how social media platforms are now, especially with how popular TikTok has become, and YouTube as well. But these are not just visual platforms. These are audio focused, sometimes even audio first platforms. And the example I keep giving is, I mentioned that example of when people sing the jingle. We're a big company. We're on a lot of different platforms, and kind of regardless of if it's TikTok or Instagram or even Twitter or Facebook, we see people just naturally want to sing that jingle. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're trying to tap into, is not push that information at people. I guess we've been guilty, right? We do campaigns where we bring that jingle to life, but as much as we can encourage our audience to embrace that, they're naturally doing it. We see people post videos all the time of their little kid who, for the first time, is learning music, and the first thing they're saying is the Nationwide jingle, or people who are learning to play instruments, a guitar, and among the first thing that they learn to play is the Nationwide jingle. What we try to do is create that environment of not just, tapping into the power of what the social platform can provide, which is essentially a forum to create. But what we're trying to do is find the right way to amplify that, right? It's really cool when a Fortune 100 company engages with that person, right? Sends them a message, replies, comments, and amplifies, right? We share it to our platforms. We create that sort of amplification, that forum for them to really shine. That connection, really embracing that connection to our brand, and then creating that environment of making people feel like they're part of the creative process. That's fun. That's that part of the basics of social media, even before we get into campaigns and how we're trying to connect and create some brand awareness, and obviously even more than just brand awareness. But at the heart of things, what I keep saying is that platforms will change. We've seen platforms change. They will come and go. But what people have tapped into is they want to have fun. They want to create, and they can probably do sometimes a better job than we can. So why not give them the tools to do that? Embrace it, and then be there to participate, to encourage, and to have some fun with everyone as they're playing along.
Absolutely. We say all the time how important it is to be there on social media, listening, watching, right? Without going back too much, again on the jingle, but with Zaya Kamba, right? What happened there, with the video, and then years after, happened that she basically, right, go back, with your official channel and for the challenge, right, to get also other people there and everything. So it was very cool to see. And also wanted to ask you, so because of the importance, right, of being there, and as you correctly said, many times the normal common user can make a video that's going to be viral that even maybe 5 senior marketing, managers, right, can think about the strategy, but sometimes it's random, right? You need luck, you need to have a person understand what is happening in terms of trends and so on. So because of that, how much are important and how do you manage when it comes to both UGC, so user generated content, but also in a company like, especially big like Nationwide, also the EGC, right? So employee generated content, right? We see more and more that people want to see the behind the scene of a business. They want to see the brand value. They want to see the human connections, right? Before the brand itself. How do you, again, it's something that you, like, how do you manage all this? Because I imagine there is a lot of content out there. So tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah. I'll start with the UGC, which not that there's necessarily a complete disconnect from the UGC part.
Yeah.
With UGC, like I mentioned, part of this is just natural. It's occurring. It's just there are people out there who are singing that jingle and who are who are doing that regardless of if we're encouraging them to do so. And I think you mentioned this. This is the big part. It is about setting up the infrastructure to be able to do something when that happens. So, we are a company. We have the benefit of having access to some tools that allow us to have a very large infrastructure for social listening, and a lot goes into that. It's not just the jingle, but it is and it's also not just when people tag us, which usually is when they're reaching out and they're trying to get our attention. This is about the conversations that they're having with their friends or on a creator's channel that they like, that they are spending time with. And so part of that is having the infrastructure and spending that time, not just thinking of social as a channel to push, but really seeing what is out there. Social listening it's one of the biggest pillars of our overall strategy. And I think I mentioned this as well too, but not just listening, but then having the ability to do something. And we are a highly regulated company. So when something happens, and it's not just the jingle, but when someone polishes something about us, we're regulated. There's a lot of implications that come along with that. And we've spent a lot of time creating guidelines, or at least some guardrails, working with our PR team, working with our legal teams or compliance teams, and setting some clear guidelines for our community managers and for the team that, is tapping into that infrastructure of social listening, so that they know when we can do something or when something might need a little extra eye of approval, or just to make sure that, that we're taking the right steps before doing something or engaging as a brand. But having that clarity, that's something that's really hard to do on the fly. That's where delays can happen. That's where, time is one of the most important factors when it comes to social media, and especially social listening. So we've spent a lot of time on not just the ability to listen, not just the ability to see and find that UGC, which is extremely important, but also working with some key partners internally and sometimes externally, just to make sure that we've got the clear guidelines of, we can do this, and here are the expectations, and here's the goal. You mentioned employee generated content, which I think is so interesting. I'll be honest, we're relatively new in formalizing that. We have a new program where our employees are able to contribute and participate in social media, but it's not only new because they're employees and they've probably been doing this for years, just not as part of an official platform. And I think you're right. I think people want to see that behind the scenes. They want to get the real story. Whether it's employee generated content or user generated content, I think one of the kind of key trends that we've already seen, but we're really trying to embrace, and I think it's only going to get faster and maybe more so in this area, is just that. Whether it's people want to hear the real stories. They don't always want to just hear from the brands. They want to hear from the people that they trust. They want to hear from their neighbor, their friend. They want to say, if I'm doing business with Nationwide, or if I'm considering their product, or honestly any product or any company, they might listen to us, but they are first going to listen to that person that they trust. And so that UGC, that EGC, I think that's the future. I think we're going to see more and more smaller, for lack of a better word, influencer type people who are going to be sought after to deliver the real story, of the real experience of what it's like to work with Nationwide or to have a product with us. I think that's where the trend is going. I kind of go back to social listening. We need to know if that's coming from an employee. We need to know if that's coming from a user. But maybe even more importantly, we need to accept the reality that this is happening. People are going to be out there telling those stories. So let's arm people with tools and resources so that they can tell, a full story, a complete story, something that is representative of the full story of what it's like to have an experience with a company like that. So I think it's a big trend. I think it's only going to get more and more along that way. And we are doing our best to not just stay up to speed, but to really start to look as far out as possible, not just weeks and months, but if possible, as many years as is reliable, to try to get a sense of how those trends are going to impact the work that we do.
Hello! Is your brand ready to amplify its reach? Well, the Influencer Marketing Factory is here to do just that. We are a global influencer marketing agency helping brands ignite their growth, from influencer identification to campaign strategy, handling legalities and agreements to managing shipping and logistics. We have it all covered. We work with hundreds of brands across different verticals, from Fortune 500 companies to DTC brands. And we don't just stop there. With detailed ROI analysis, we help brands like yours measure success, transforming impressions into actionable conversions. You can find us at the influencermarketingfactory.com or just search the Influencer Marketing Factory on Google.
Yeah, I mean, I might be biased, but that's why influencer marketing works, right? That's because you look for someone that is your peer, especially when it comes to something, as you said, like regulated, difficult to understand sometimes, right? You want to have someone that's going to be on your side, is going to give you the real, transparent, like review of something. And then if you learn that from either an employee that you trust or a friend and family, you go in that direction, right? And so because of this, right, we covered about the importance of content, right? But content without an audience, watching and listening, it's nothing, right? You can create the best content out there, but if no one really listening, it's what's the actually value of that. And in some episode in the past, we differentiate something that is, the audience, right? So the audience is usually passive group of people that is interested in something but doesn't really engage. While on the other hand, you have something that is getting even more popular, that is community, right? And community is this active group of people that might be a bit smaller sometimes. It depends by the type of community, right? Could be niche, could be macro, but they are active. They talk to each other. They want to meet and so on. And more communities are intersection, right? Different people together. And so in your case, for instance, you also create that partnership, right? With different communities. One of that is like NFL, for instance, right? So why don't we talk about, how do you get two worlds that are so different, right, together in terms of, again, social media, NFL talents, influencers, content creators? How do you even manage something big like that?
I think it's a great question. The partnership with the NFL is, I think, a very good example of just that, of a partnership, of not sponsorship, but really trying to tap into this fan base. So if I think about the communities that we've not just built on social media, but these fan bases, think about the natural ways that someone might connect with a company like ours. So there's obviously that musical connection because of the nationwide jingle. You've seen some of our partnerships and sponsorships with these musical artists. Their natural tie-in. There is a fan base associated with that artist. NFL, that is something that it really started with a focus on community. So our sponsorship of the NFL is focused on the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, right? The focus of that is about these players that every year are awarded a recognition for the work that they're doing in their community. This is their off the field contributions to community. That really speaks to something that we care about. So it's not just a partnership or a relationship where we get some advantage of just saying nationwide or trying to get in front of this audience. What we're trying to do is we see this as an invitation, right? We've got this partnership with the NFL. We've got that Walter Payton Man of the Year award, which is a huge opportunity to really connect with that fan base. And the way that I usually describe it is this: people don't want to, not that they don't want to hear from us, but they much rather hear from their hero, right? The football player, the team, the person that they watch, every Sunday. And we can provide a behind the scenes, an exclusive access, some interesting way. And if you can hear from Andrew Whitworth or this last year's winner, Cam Hayward, talk about what's inspiring to them, how they plan, how they think about production, how they plan, which isn't the only messages that they're talking about. But if we can provide them some access, provide their fan base, their audience with some access to some really cool stories, that's going to create a connection. That's going to create a reason for people to come back to us, to perk up when they see some content from us. And it really isn't about pushing a message through those channels, it really is about what are those mutual connections, what are those really cool things that through this partnership we have access to, and what are some new and different ways that we can bring some of those stories to light? What are some ways that you can see those players and those teams in maybe a way that you didn't think of them before? You see them, all suited up and playing that game, but have you ever seen them doing a community event with the Boys and Girls Club where they're able to connect with kids and we can be there and show what that looks like? And it's very intimate. It's a very cool experience. So that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to, whether it's music or football fans, and we have other partnerships as well with the National Women's Soccer League. Those fan bases are community. We don't want to be the company that steps in and tries to ruin a good thing.
Yeah.
We want to speak their language. We want to, give them more of what they're looking for. And I think the more that we can deliver on that, the more trust we're building. And that way, when they do think of Nationwide, or they do think of maybe a key milestone in their life where they might be in need of insurance or financial services, it's a familiar face and it's not done in an invasive or inappropriate or doesn't come across as an outsider. We want to truly be part of that community. And I think we spend a lot of time, a lot of work specifically on social doing just that. We've got to speak their language. We've got to know what those topics are. We've got to know we can't be the funny meme of like the hello fellow kids. Like we can't be that. Yeah. There's an authenticity, it could get sniffed out really quickly, and we've got to be authentic. So that's really what we strive for with all of those partnerships.
Especially because these days, consumers on social media, they are not dumb, right? They see when it's authentic and when it's not, and they like when it's not invasive, right? So again, as you correctly said, when you're part of it, you're not just like an outsider getting in one day. You go this advertisement, this some money, and you go away. You want to be part of the community. You want to, again, be, as you said, I like when you say the familiar face, right? That is gonna familiar name right there during the conversations. And so, to go back at, the beginning of our conversation, right? When you said I've been in this for like, a decade, is there any other, piece of advice that you would give to, leaders, right? That want to develop, right? Basically an efficient, right? But at the same time also, effective content strategy. Again, there is so much going on. There is so many trends happening, so many things to understand. It's difficult sometimes to keep up with things. What is your, method behind that?
You touched on the first part. The advice that I would give to anyone in social media, or honestly, probably in marketing, is start with the audience first. I think, unfortunately, we see too many times when marketing messages or campaigns don't do so well, it's because it started with the me first. It started with the company, the product, or the message first. And that's important. That's important for product development. That is important for other parts of marketing. But when it comes down to going to market in an authentic way, there is just something about social media. I think this is to your point. It can be sniffed out, and you're going to come across as an outsider unless you spent the time in really understanding who is that audience, where are they, where do they spend their time. I think we are hopefully coming out of eras where we see brands create content and then put that same piece of content on every single channel because it's a distribution platform more than what it should be seen as, which is an opportunity to be invited to a community of people who are already participating in conversations. And let's become a part of that. And you have to do that in a way that starts audience first. We've done some work. We really looked at what the differences are between the people who follow us on Instagram or who consume our content on Instagram versus TikTok, even though, I could create a video and put it on both platforms, but the person who's viewing that is not the same person on both of those platforms. So I think the more time that anyone in social media, or at least in marketing, can spend taking those first steps of really understanding that's at least the first key to success. The other part that you mentioned about trends, I agree. I think maybe no more so than in social media do we spend so much time thinking about or maybe being driven by the trends of what's happening right now. And I think that can be dangerous as well, right? We've seen some brands try to follow and try to jump in on a trend, and it just doesn't work. Some of that is because of the first part, because the audience isn't there or isn't receptive to that message. But I think it's always a really good exercise to not just look at, and again, I kind of go back to the platform. So if you look at even a relatively new-ish platform at least for us, like TikTok. That is a new platform, but the underlying value that platform provides isn't really all that new. It's a creator platform.
Mhm.
It is an opportunity to give people who are very creative tools to do something funny or do something really creative. And I think if you look at not just the trend, but what is the underlying truth of any platform, right? These platforms, a lot of them have been around for a while. Some of them may not be around in 6 months or a year, or certainly not 5 years. But what is that underlying theme? And if the theme is these platforms are uniquely trying to create an opportunity for different communities or different types of audiences to create something and entertain each other, and brands and companies are essentially being invited into those conversations. What are those common themes? Don't chase a trend as much as you can really identify really the core of what that platform is supposed to deliver and what that audience wants on that platform. So it might be a long-winded answer, but I think those two things, I really think audience first and getting to the core of what these platforms are really supposed to be or really strive to be. I think that's going to be where I would give anyone advice. I would say at least start there.
Nice. That's fantastic advice, especially I love when you say about all these trends. We notice that many times we might win on the short term and then lose on the long term, right? Because in order to win over maybe a new generation or a new niche of market, you are basically losing all your current customers that have been with you for a long time because they're like, they don't understand you anymore. Like, why are they jumping on this trend? That's not their DNA. And so sometimes, right, it's easier to just say, oh, let's do this because everyone is doing that. But then sometimes it's better to say, no, we're not going to do this challenge because it's not part of our DNA and would be very chaotic, right, for our customers. So thank you for, saying that. And the last question for you today, I ask this, of course, to all our guests. I know it's difficult. It's a big question, but what is the future of the creator economy for you?
I think we're going to see, at least in the near term, I think we're going to see the creator economy get more and more niche and more and more specialized. Not that we won't see these big influencers with obviously the ability to reach massive audiences. I think that's always going to be a thing. But I think we're going to see a little bit of a shift in the trust among the audiences of where they look to really get that important information. And I think we're going to see creators who can really hone in on a topic or an industry or something very specific, not be the jack of all trades and try to be everything to everyone, or have brand partnerships with all these different brands and try to change the delivery just because, there's a deal or there's something in it. I think authenticity and trust is going to be driven by specialization. And I think the creator economy is going to get faster and smarter and better. And I think with that is going to come maybe a little bit of a shift on some more niche, more focused areas. And again, this is more of a trend than where I see the creator economy going. I think that speed to market is going to be just exceptionally fast. Add in tools that can make everyone's day easier, like AI tools, not just the generative AI, but even just the inspiration that you can get from some of those tools. And I think speed and specialization is where we're going to see a lot of that creator economy go.
Fantastic. I've been, seeing the same happening. It's already happening, but for some people, it's, I've been in this industry for 10 years. So for me, it's like, of course, but for many new, many brands out there, it's still so new that for them, it's still the beginning, right? So I'm very curious to see what is going to happen there. But Dace, thank you so much for joining me today. It was great to, hear about your knowledge about the industry, nationwide, everything that you did. And best of luck, for the new campaigns. I'm pretty sure that pretty cool things are going to arrive soon. So I really can't wait to see them.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
This was The Influence Factor by the Influencer Marketing Factory, and I'll see you next week.